Poor single dad used his last penny for paralyzed girl's cake. What happened next froze the CEO cold. The snow had been falling for hours, thick, relentless flakes that blurred the world into shades of white and quiet. The town of Ashbury had already gone to sleep. Streetlights hummed dimly, the air smelled like iron and frost, and somewhere between Main and Willow Street, a man in a worn brown jacket pressed through the wind, clutching a handful of coins that jingled like ghosts in his palm. Clayton Reed wasn't supposed to be outside. He should have been home fixing the broken heater, helping his 8-year-old daughter Emmy finish her homework by candlelight. But there he was, boots sinking into snow, walking toward the one place still faintly lit at 8:57 p.m. Harper's Bakery. Its windows fogged from the heat of ovens long turned off. He pushed the door open. A bell chimed weakly, like even it was too tired for this kind of night. The air inside smelled of vanilla and sugar, faint but comforting, like something human surviving the cold. Behind the counter stood Martha, the store's elderly manager, her apron dusted with flour. She looked up in surprise. "Clay Reed, Lord, what are you doing here? We're closing. I know," he said, his breath still visible in the warm air. "I just need a cake. A small one. Whatever's left." Martha blinked. "Honey, it's near closing time. We don't keep cakes this late." Clayton nodded slowly. His hands trembled a little as he laid a few crumpled bills and coins on the counter. "It's for Lucy, the girl next door. Today's her birthday, the little one in the wheelchair." He nodded again. "Emmy says she hasn't smiled in weeks. I promised we'd surprise her." Martha's eyes softened, then drifted to the register. She could see what was in his hand, barely enough for a box of cookies, much less a cake. "Clay, honey," she said quietly, "you don't owe anyone that kind of promise." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but she deserves a reason to blow out a candle." There was silence, just the ticking clock on the wall and the slow hum of the refrigerator in the back. Then Martha sighed. "Wait here." She disappeared through the kitchen doors. Clayton exhaled, rubbing his frozen hands together. His eyes scanned the empty display cases, crumbs, traces of frosting, nothing left but the smell of something that used to make people happy. When Martha returned, she was carrying a small white box. "This was supposed to go to a charity dinner uptown," she said. "Got canceled because of the storm. I was just going to toss it tomorrow." Clayton hesitated. "How much?" She waved him off. "You've got a kind heart, Clay. That's enough." But he insisted, pushing the coins toward her. "No charity. Not for me." Martha looked at him, this man who'd lost his wife, his job, his peace, and understood that pride was the only thing he had left to keep him standing. So she took one coin, a single quarter, and slid the box across the counter. "Then it's yours," she said softly. "And tell Lucy happy birthday from Harper's." Clayton smiled, the kind of smile that belonged to a man used to losing, but still choosing kindness anyway. "Thank you, Martha." He turned toward the door, the little box cradled carefully in his arms, like something sacred. The bell above the door chimed again as he stepped back into the snow. Across town, miles away, a woman stared at the glowing screen of her tablet inside a penthouse office. Madeline Grant, CEO of Gateau Grant, the luxury bakery empire that supplied Harper's and 100 others across the Midwest, was reviewing end-of-year reports when a red notification blinked on her screen. "Canceled order, NAR 4739, Ashbury Branch, Charity Gala." She frowned. She didn't like loose ends. Every item had to be tracked, accounted for, justified. Madeline tapped the file open. The product photo appeared a single-layer white cake with pale pink icing sugar flowers pressed into its border and a handwritten note attached, "Hope Blooms." For a moment, her breath hitched. That phrase, "Hope Blooms." It wasn't just a name. It was the name her daughter's favorite phrase before the accident 7 years ago. A phrase she hadn't heard seen or said since that day. Madeline sat back suddenly cold, despite the heat vent humming above her. She closed the tablet, but the image stayed behind her eyelids. The cake, the handwriting, the ghost of something she'd buried under success and noise. She didn't sleep that night. Meanwhile, back on Willow Street, the storm had quieted to a whisper. Clayton trudged through the snow, his boots leaving uneven prints. In the small duplex he called home, lights flickered from a single lamp in the window. Inside, Emmy sat cross-legged on the floor making a hand-drawn birthday card. "Daddy," she squealed when he entered. "You got it." Clayton smiled, brushing snow from his shoulders. "I got it, kiddo." He set the box on the table. Emmy gasped when he opened it. The cake was small but beautiful white frosting pink edges, and in the center the words written in cursive, "For the brave girl." "It's perfect," Emmy whispered. 10 minutes later, they were at Lucy's house. The lights inside were dim. Lucy's father worked nights. She lived with her grandmother, who opened the door with a weary smile. Clayton lifted the box. "We were hoping to bring a little birthday to her." The old woman's eyes glistened. "Oh, bless you." They entered the living room, warm but quiet. Lucy sat near the window in her wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, pale and still. When Emmy brought the cake to her lap, the girl blinked in surprise. "For me," Lucy asked softly, her voice barely a whisper. "For you," Clayton said. "You're the bravest girl I know." Emmy struck a match and lit the single candle. "Make a wish." Lucy looked at the flame. It flickered gently, reflecting in her eyes like something she'd almost forgotten. Then she smiled a real shy, fragile smile and blew it out. For a heartbeat, the room was silent. Then Emmy laughed. Lucy laughed too, a thin sound, small but pure. Clayton felt something shift in the air like warmth, sneaking back into a place that had forgotten how to hold it. "Wait," Emmy said, pulling out her mother's old phone. "I want to show the lady from the bakery. Maybe she'll see it." She recorded Lucy's smile, the little candle, the cake. Then she uploaded it online, tagging the bakery's name from the box. 2 days later, that 30-second clip would reach over 1 million views. But that night, Clayton didn't care about numbers or screens. He just tucked Emmy into bed, stared at the snow outside, and whispered to himself, "It's not much, but it's something." And somewhere in a high-rise in Chicago, Madeline Grant reopened the order logs for Ashbury Bakery. The canceled file was gone, vanished. She pulled up the security feed and paused at a grainy frame of a man holding a small white box, snow falling around him like ash. For the first time in years, she didn't know what she was feeling. Anger, curiosity, grief, or something she'd forgotten the name of. She zoomed in, reading the faint label on the box, Harper's Bakery, Ashbury, Ohio. Then she whispered almost to herself, "Who are you, Mr. Reed?" Outside the city, lights flickered against the storm, and somewhere deep in the cold Midwest night a story of love loss and second chances had just begun. The flame from the birthday candle had been out for hours, but its glow still lingered in the corners of the living room and the walls that had forgotten joy, and especially in the fragile smile of the girl in the chair. Clayton stood in his kitchen that night, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of weak coffee, staring out the window at the blanket of snow that continued to fall over Ashbury like silence. Behind him, the small heater whined softly, barely warming the room, but enough to keep Emmy curled up on the couch with a blanket wrapped around her like a burrito, sketching little hearts and frosting swirls in her notebook. He watched her for a long moment, that easy way she smiled even after everything, the kind of resilience only kids had. Emmy had inherited her mother's warmth and maybe just a touch of his stubbornness. "Did you see her face, Daddy?" she said suddenly, still looking down at her drawing. Lucy smiled like it was the first real smile in forever. Clayton nodded, his voice low. "Yeah, I saw it. She didn't even care it wasn't a big cake," Emmy added. "She just looked at it like it was magic." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it was." Across the street, in a modest duplex wrapped in ivy and thyme, Lucy lay in bed. Her legs, stiff and unmoving beneath the covers, barely registered the cold anymore, but her cheeks were still warm from the laughter she hadn't expected to find that night. The cake had been wheeled into the kitchen by her grandmother, and the frosting had been sweet, soft, simple, just like the moment. but it was the message that stuck with her for the brave girl. Lucy traced the words over and over in her mind as if memorizing them would make them true. Her mother used to call her that, before the accident, before the silence. "Do you want your music on tonight, sweetheart?" her grandmother asked from the doorway. Lucy shook her head. "No, Nana. I just want to remember today." And so she did, in silence. But it wasn't the lonely kind this time. It was the full kind, the kind that wraps around you like a soft quilt and makes you feel safe. By morning, the snow had settled a quiet hush over the whole town. It was Sunday, and Ashbury moved slower than usual. The streets were still the mailboxes dressed in white, and the world looked like it had paused just long enough to breathe. Emmy burst into Clayton's room, holding the phone. "Dad. Dad, look." He blinked awake, rubbing his eyes. "Emmy, it's barely 7. She shoved the screen toward him. A video was playing a 30-second clip of Lucy's birthday. Her smile. The candle. Emmy's giggle in the background. Below the video, the view count ticked upward. 12,000. 14,500. 16,102. Clayton sat up. "Where did you post that? I tagged the bakery, Harper's, and it went boom." She said, hands thrown up like fireworks. "People are sharing it. One lady even wrote, 'This is the most beautiful thing I've seen all year.'" He stared at the screen, unsure whether to be proud or worried. But then he looked at Lucy's face, frozen mid-laughter in the thumbnail, and something inside him settled. Let the world see what kindness looks like, he thought. Maybe we could all use a little more of it. That afternoon, Clayton and Emmy made their way back to Lucy's house. Emmy carried a box of cookies, just store-bought but tied with a ribbon she found in a junk drawer. When they knocked, Nana June opened the door with a brightness in her eyes Clayton hadn't seen before. "She's in the sunroom," she said. "Hasn't stopped smiling since last night." Inside, the walls were lit with soft winter light pouring through wide windows. Lucy sat in her wheelchair, a wool blanket draped over her legs, holding a sketch pad in her lap. She looked up and grinned. "Hi," she said. Emmy rushed over, placing the cookies in Lucy's lap. "We brought dessert for breakfast," Lucy giggled. "Best idea ever." Clayton hung back, letting the girls chatter. He watched from a quiet corner of the room, his arms crossed, taking it all in. Lucy's eyes were brighter today, her shoulders less tense. Even her voice had a different kind of lift to it, like it was remembering how to float. Nana June leaned in beside him. "You brought something into this house we haven't seen in a long time, Clay." He shook his head. "Just a cake." "No, she said you brought back light." He didn't answer. What could he say? That all he'd done was stumble into a bakery with a handful of coins and a wish that something, anything, could break the heaviness. The truth was, he didn't believe in miracles. But he believed in effort. He believed in showing up. And sometimes that was enough. That night, miles away in Chicago, Madeline Grant sat alone in her high-rise kitchen, a sleek space with marble counters and cold lighting that made everything look clean and unlived. She watched the viral video again, this time with the sound on. She heard the giggle, the whisper of "make a wish," and the candles flicker. She paused it on Lucy's smile. Something in her cracked quietly, like the sound of a porcelain cup set down too hard. That cake had been hers. Not just designed by her, not just part of a brand, but her personal recipe. The very one she'd made once long ago with a 3-year-old girl in pink pajamas, flour on her nose, singing nonsense songs about frosting rainbows. Her daughter, 7 years gone. And now that cake had ended up in the hands of a stranger in a small town she hadn't set foot in since her first franchise opened. Madeline tapped her keyboard, pulling up the Ashbury location's delivery log. 1 canceled order. No record of disposal. No explanation. She accessed the security feed. The grainy black and white footage showed a man in a heavy coat walking into the bakery. She zoomed in. He looked tired, not desperate, determined. Then, just before the door closed behind him, she saw a little girl with a wide smile waiting outside, jumping in place, holding something in her hands. The image held her still. Madeline sat back, pressing her fingers to her lips. She hadn't believed in fate in a long time. But this felt like a thread tugging at the edges of a tightly wound heart. The video, the man, the girl, the message. For the brave girl. It wasn't just a cake. It was a memory, a spark, a knock on a door she'd locked and boarded shut. And for the first time in 7 years, Madeline Grant stood up, walked across the room, and pulled open the drawer that held a single object, a child's apron, still dusted with flour. She pressed it to her chest and whispered, "Hope blooms." Back in Ashbury, Clayton tucked Emmy in for the night. The heater groaned again, but the room was warm enough. "Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "Yeah, do you think we'll see her again?" "Who, the bakery lady? The one who made the cake?" Clayton thought for a moment. "I don't know, sweetheart. But maybe she saw us." And in Chicago, as snow began to fall outside her penthouse window, Madeline Grant booked a one-way ticket to Ashbury, Ohio. Because some stories don't end with a smile. They begin with one. The wind screamed down Michigan Avenue, slicing through the canyon of glass and steel that was downtown Chicago. But inside the top floor of Gateau Grant headquarters, everything was still sterile, immaculate, and ruled by precision. Madeline Grant stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection sharp against the night sky. The city glittered beneath her like a universe built on ambition and exhaustion. Behind her, the boardroom lights cast her shadow long across the table, the kind of shadow that belonged to someone powerful and profoundly alone. On the table sat a tablet paused on the same video she'd watched 3 times that day. A little girl in a wheelchair. A single candle. A cake that shouldn't have existed anymore. Madeline's assistant, Clara, stood near the door clutching a tablet and trying not to look uncomfortable. "Ms. Grant," she began softly, "you're scheduled for a radio interview at 9 tomorrow. They'll want to discuss the Foundation's cancel item." Clara blinked. "Cancel. But it's NPR cancel," Madeline repeated, turning away from the glass. Her voice was calm but final. "And reschedule everything else for the next 3 days." Clara hesitated. "Are you going somewhere?" Madeline's gaze drifted back to the screen. She tapped the replay icon. The room filled with the sound of children laughing, the kind of laughter that didn't belong in her life anymore. "Yes," she said quietly. "I'm going home." It had been 7 years since she'd last said those words and meant them. 7 years since the car accident that took her daughter Sophie, and with her the last piece of softness Madeline owned. After that, she'd built walls, beautiful, expensive walls made of stainless steel kitchens, 5-star hotels, and press headlines calling her the Queen of Confection. Her company had grown into an empire, but inside she'd stopped tasting anything. Until that video. Until that cake. The one she'd baked herself once upon a time in a smaller, quieter life. The train from Chicago to Ashbury took 6 hours, slicing through endless fields of snow and gray morning light. Madeline sat in the corner seat of the nearly empty car, dressed not in her usual tailored suit, but in jeans boots and a red wool coat. Still, she carried herself like someone used to boardrooms, not bakeries. Her phone buzzed nonstop calls from the board messages from investors, but she ignored them all. Instead, she scrolled through screenshots of the viral video freezing on the frame that showed a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his face half hidden by a scarf, handing the cake to the child. She zoomed in, studying the way he held the box, careful, reverent. That care struck her more deeply than she expected. It wasn't about the cake, it was about meaning. And meaning was something she'd forgotten how to bake. By the time Madeline stepped off the train, the town of Ashbury looked like a postcard someone had left out in the snow too long. Edges, softened colors, muted beautiful in its weariness. She walked the few blocks to Harper's Bakery, her heels clicking against the icy sidewalk. Red ones this time. Old habit. They'd once been her armor. The bell above the bakery door jingled as she stepped inside. Warmth hit her like a memory vanilla cinnamon, and something older than both. Behind the counter stood Martha, wiping her hands on a flour-stained apron. She looked up, blinked, and almost dropped the tray she was carrying. Lord have mercy, Martha whispered. You're her, aren't you? The Gateau Grant lady. Madeline offered a polite smile. I suppose I am. What brings you here? Did we forget an order? Oh, don't tell me corporate's shutting us down. I'm not here for business, Madeline interrupted gently. I'm looking for a man. Clayton Reed. He came in 3 nights ago. Martha froze her eyes, narrowing with a mix of curiosity and caution. Clay. What about him? I believe he bought something that didn't belong to him. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the back. Bought, Martha repeated slowly, not stole? Madeline hesitated. Yes, well, technically it was a cancelled order. He wasn't authorized to. Ma'am, Martha said, leaning on the counter he paid for that cake. Every cent he had. Madeline frowned. You let him? I did. Silence stretched between them, thick as frosting. Then Martha sighed and crossed her arms. You really don't understand, do you? That cake went to a little girl who needed to remember what happy feels like. Madeline swallowed. I saw the video. Then you saw what it meant. Madeline nodded quietly. That's why I'm here. Martha gave her the address. By the time Madeline reached the edge of Willow Street, the afternoon sun was already bleeding gold across the snow. Her breath came out in small clouds as she climbed the steps of the small duplex, uncertain of what she'd say. She knocked once, twice. When the door opened, she found herself staring at the man from the video. Clayton Reed. Up close, he was even more human than she'd imagined. Tired eyes, strong jaw hands that looked like they'd spent more years fixing broken things than holding soft ones. Can I help you? He asked. Madeline hesitated, momentarily disarmed. Mr. Reed. That's me. I know who you are, he said. You're the lady from the box, Gateau Grant. Her lips parted. You recognized it, hard to miss the logo when it's half the price of my rent. Madeline winced slightly at the edge in his tone. I didn't come to collect money. Then why are you here? She looked past him for a second. Inside, she saw warmth, the kind of home built on love, not luxury. The kind she'd forgotten existed. There was a mix-up, she said carefully. That cake wasn't supposed to leave the bakery. Well, it did. She exhaled. I'm aware. I just needed to understand why. Clayton crossed his arms. Because a kid needed it more than the trash did. The bluntness stung, but it was honest. Madeline opened her mouth to reply, but before she could, a small voice came from behind him. Daddy! Who's that? A girl peeked out, a swirl of curls, big eyes, a hoodie with paint stains. This is Ms. Grant, Clayton said. She's from the bakery. Emmy's eyes widened. You made the cake. Madeline blinked. Yes, I suppose I did. A moment later, another voice joined in, softer but steady. It was beautiful. Lucy. She sat near the window in her wheelchair, her blanket tucked neatly around her legs. Madeline stepped inside before she could stop herself. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon and crayons. Lucy smiled at her, a small, hesitant smile that felt like sunlight on an old photograph. You made the cake, Lucy said again. Madeline nodded. I did. It made me happy. And just like that, something in Madeline's chest gave way. The air felt heavier and lighter all at once. Well, she managed her voice, trembling slightly, then I guess it found the right home after all. That night, as she walked back through the snow toward her rented car, the world felt strangely quiet. For years, she'd measured success in sales and headlines. But now, it seemed to whisper something else entirely. A little girl's laughter, a man's pride, a father's warmth, things you can't buy, things you can only feel. And for the first time in 7 years, Madeline Grant didn't feel like a CEO. She felt like a person who'd finally remembered what she'd lost. The next morning arrived cloaked in soft clouds, and a chill that settled into Ashbury like an old friend who never stayed too long, but never quite left either. Madeline Grant sat in the passenger seat of a rental sedan staring out the windshield at Harper's Bakery. The building looked smaller in daylight, its bricks faded, its sign slightly tilted, but there was something undeniably honest about it. In Chicago, everything was polished, curated, elevated. But here, even the imperfections felt like they belonged. She watched a mother walk past the bakery with her son, both holding warm cups with whipped cream peeking out the lids. They were smiling. Madeline couldn't remember the last time she smiled over coffee with anyone. She exhaled and stepped out. Inside, Martha was setting out fresh scones when the bell above the door jingled. Her eyes flicked up and widened. "You again," she said, not unkindly. "Didn't scare you off, did I?" Madeline gave a tight smile. "Not yet." Martha motioned toward the coffee urn. "Well, in that case, grab a cup. But the good stuff doesn't brew itself." Madeline poured herself some black coffee, strong and slightly burnt. She took a sip and winced, but didn't complain. Somehow, it felt right. "I need access to the order system," Madeline said quietly, leaning across the counter. "And the security footage from last Friday. I know you said Mr. Reed paid for the cake, but I want to see it for myself." Martha raised an eyebrow. "You don't believe me." "I do," Madeline said, "but it's not about the money anymore. I need to understand what really happened, and why it's stuck in my head like a song I can't stop hearing." There was a pause. Then, with a shrug, Martha turned the register screen toward her and tapped in a few commands. "Knock yourself out." 30 minutes later, Madeline was sitting alone at the corner table, eyes scanning through grainy footage on a company tablet. She watched herself appear briefly in the reflection of the glass door as she entered 2 nights ago. Then, further back, the moment Clayton had stepped into the bakery. 8:57 p.m. Coat damp with snow, jaw tight. He pulled out a crumpled wad of cash, then hesitated, hands shaking. You didn't need sound to feel the weight in the room. She watched as Martha walked off screen and returned with the cake. Her cake. Clayton didn't beg. He didn't ask for favors. He offered every cent he had and took the box like it was glass, holding it close to his chest as he walked back into the blizzard. It wasn't theft. It wasn't pity. It was dignity, plain and clear. Madeline sat back, screen flickering in front of her, and closed her eyes. So many people in her world negotiated millions over dinner. But somehow, that little transaction, 4 bills and a fistful of coins, was the most honest business she'd seen in years. Later that afternoon, Madeline found herself walking once again toward Clayton Reed's house. But this time, she wasn't there to confront. She was there to ask. The door opened before she knocked. Emmy stood there mid-bite of an apple, wide-eyed. "You came back." Madeline smiled. "Looks like I did." Behind her, Clayton appeared. He looked surprised but less guarded than before. "Miss Grant," he said. "Is everything all right? I was wondering if we could talk," she said. "Just you and me, if that's okay." He glanced back into the house, then nodded. "Sure. Walk with me." They walked side by side down a quiet lane dusted with snow. The air smelled of pine and chimney smoke. The town felt like a painting, quiet still and deceptively simple. "I saw the footage," Madeline said after a minute. "At the bakery." Clayton didn't respond at first. "I wasn't spying," she added. I had to see it. I had to understand." He nodded. "And did you? I think so." They walked another few steps. "Can I ask," Madeline said softly, "why her?" He looked up. "Lucy." She nodded. "Because no one else thought to." Clayton said, eyes fixed on the snow-covered sidewalk. "Because her birthday was going to pass like any other day. And I've been there. I know what it's like to feel invisible." She looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "My wife passed from cancer 3 years ago," he said quietly. "I lost my job a few months later when the plant shut down. Emmy." She kept me going. "But Lucy." She reminded me that some kids lose more than we can see. I couldn't give her a cure or legs that work, but I could give her a cake, just one moment that said, "I see you." Madeline felt her throat tighten. They reached the edge of the park. Snow blanketed the benches. A few birds fluttered near a bare tree, picking at scattered crumbs. "I used to make cakes with my daughter," she said finally. "Sophie. She was 3 when it happened." Clayton looked over, his expression softening. "She loved baking. Messy as all hell, but she said flour felt like snow on her fingers. Madeline smiled faintly. That cake, the one Lucy got, was the last one I designed with her. They stood in silence for a moment. I didn't think I'd ever see that recipe again, she whispered. Let alone see it matter. It did, Clayton said. It really did. That night, Madeline returned to her hotel and opened her laptop. She typed one sentence into a blank document. What if kindness was the business model? Then she closed it heart lighter than it had been in years. Meanwhile, across town, Lucy held the empty cake box in her lap like a treasure chest. On the inside of the lid, she'd scribbled her own message in colorful marker to the lady who made me feel real again. The next morning, the bakery's front bell rang again. But this time it wasn't Madeline walking in. It was a local journalist holding a phone. Did you see this? She asked, waving the screen. The story was spreading faster than expected. CEO's Cake Revives a Small-Town Girl's Spirit. And in every version of the story, there was one phrase that stood out, the last slice that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening when Madeline Grant did something she hadn't done in more than a decade. She cooked. Not in a Michelin-rated kitchen with a sous chef measuring every gram and not with a TV crew watching. No cameras, no plated garnishes, just her, a skillet, and a borrowed kitchen in the back of Harper's Bakery. The town had buzzed all day with the story. By noon, 2 local reporters had already stopped by asking questions about the cake, the man, and the girl in the chair. But Madeline had deflected them all. She wasn't here to sell a narrative. She was here to find one. And now, for the first time in a very long time, she wanted to share something not with the world, but with the people who had unknowingly stitched something torn inside her. She invited them to dinner. Clayton had been hesitant when she asked. You don't have to do this, he'd said. I know, Madeline replied. That's why I want to. The dining area was small, tucked behind the bakery's kitchen, used mostly for staff lunches and bookkeeping. Tonight it had been cleared, dusted, and lit with old string lights pulled from Martha's attic. There were 4 chairs, a wooden table, and in the middle a single candle that flickered like it was holding its breath. Madeline plated pasta she made from scratch the way her grandmother had taught her in upstate New York before all of this. Emmy and Lucy watched from a nearby stool, wide-eyed as flour flew through the air. It smells better than anything Dad's ever cooked, Emmy whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Clayton groaned. Thanks for the support, kid. Lucy giggled. It was still a delicate sound, like a bird testing its wings, but it was stronger now, less cautious. Madeline smiled as she set down the final dish. All right, she said. Let's eat. Dinner began with light conversation, safe topics. Weather, school, baked goods. Emmy asked if Madeline had ever met anyone famous. I baked for 3 presidents, Madeline said casually, twirling her pasta. Emmy's jaw dropped. That's like the Super Bowl of baking. But slowly the light tone began to shift. Clayton noticed it first. Madeline's eyes growing distant for a second when Lucy talked about her physical therapy. The slight tremble in her hand when she reached for the bread. She was hiding something, and not well. He waited until the girls wandered off to look at old cookie molds Martha had hanging on the walls before leaning forward. You don't have to keep carrying it, he said softly. Madeline blinked. Excuse me. The weight. I've seen it before. She stared at him for a long beat. Then her shoulders dropped. Her mask slipped. I had a daughter, she said. Her name was Sophie. Clayton nodded slowly, letting her find her pace. She loved baking. Messy, joyful, flour, everywhere kind of baking. The kind that ruins shirts but saves days. We used to make the Hope Blooms cake together. She chose the name, said the flowers on top looked like they were smiling. Madeline paused, the candlelight dancing in her eyes. She died in a car accident. 7 years ago, and I buried more than her that day. Clayton didn't speak. He didn't need to. I became steel, she continued. Efficiency, deadlines, headlines. I built an empire because it was easier than rebuilding myself. Her voice cracked. Then I saw Lucy's face in that video. and it was like someone yanked open a door I forgot I'd locked. Clayton leaned back, crossing his arms. And you're wondering what the hell to do with that door now? She chuckled, tearful. Something like that. He nodded. Let it stay open. She looked up. You don't have to walk through it all at once. Just don't shut it again. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then Madeline nodded. Slowly, I'll try, she said. Meanwhile, in the corner of the room, Emmy and Lucy sat huddled together, their fingers sticky from sneaking frosting off a cooling tray. You know, Emmy whispered she looks different tonight. Who, Madeline? She's softer. Lucy smiled. Maybe people are like cakes. Sometimes they need a little heat to rise. Emmy looked at her. That's really smart. Lucy blushed. I've had a lot of time to think. After dinner, as dishes were cleared and laughter lingered in the corners, Lucy surprised everyone. I have something I want to say. All eyes turned to her. She gripped the arms of her wheelchair, steadied her breath, and looked at Madeline. Your cake didn't just taste good, she said. It reminded me what happy felt like. I didn't think I'd feel that again. Madeline swallowed hard. Lucy continued. I blamed myself for my mom's death, for the accident. I thought maybe if I'd just been faster, or quieter, she wouldn't have had to rush. No, Clayton said softly. I know Lucy nodded, tears forming. But your cake, it was like someone saying, you're still worth celebrating. And that helped me want to be here again. The room was silent, emotional, still. Then Madeline stood up, walked over and knelt beside Lucy's chair. You are worth celebrating, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Every single day. And Lucy, eyes glistening, leaned forward and hugged her. Madeline hadn't been hugged like that since Sophie, and something in her heart rigid for so long finally softened. Later, as the night wound down, Clayton offered to walk Madeline back to her car. Outside, snow had started falling again, slow, lazy flakes that floated like feathers. They walked in silence for a few steps. Then Clayton said, That was a good dinner. Madeline smiled. It was. You cook better than you interrogate. She laughed genuinely this time. That bad, huh? Let's just say you're lucky Martha likes you. They stopped near the bakery steps. The wind whispered through the quiet street. I'm not sure what happens next, Madeline said honestly. Me neither, Clayton replied. But whatever it is, you're not walking through it alone anymore. They stood there for a long moment. Not as a CEO and a single father, not as two people broken in different ways, but just as two human beings. Trying, breathing, beginning again. The next morning, Ashbury woke to a sky the color of wet cement and a stillness that felt almost holy, the kind of day where everything moves slower as if the whole town was collectively holding its breath. Inside Harper's Bakery, the ovens were already humming by 6 a.m. The scent of cinnamon butter and rising yeast drifted into the street like an invitation. And for the first time in years, Madeline Grant was behind the counter, not in heels, not in silk, but in an apron 2 sizes too big and hair pulled into a messy knot. She looked ridiculous, and she felt right. Martha stood beside her, arms crossed, grinning like she'd seen a ghost bake bread. Well, I'll be. Never thought I'd see you measuring sugar with your hands again. Madeline smirked. Don't get used to it. My manicures are crying. You'll survive, Martha said, sliding a tray of croissants into the oven. And so will your soul. The decision had come quietly, like most of Madeline's life-altering moments. She didn't wake up with a business plan. There was no big epiphany, just a feeling in her chest, soft, persistent. A voice that said, stay. So she did. Officially, she told the corporate board she was on personal leave. Unofficially, she told them nothing at all. For the first time in forever, she didn't owe anyone a justification, not even herself. What she did do, however, was ask Martha for a favor. I want to help rebuild the original store, Madeline said over coffee. Not just for baking, for something more. Martha raised an eyebrow. More a place for people like us. Broken people. Madeline met her gaze. No. Healing people. Martha smiled slowly. Same difference, honey. By the end of the week, the bakery looked different, not newer, not flashier, just warmer. The walls were repainted in soft colors that didn't scream for attention but whispered comfort. The old corkboard near the coffee station was covered in photos, kids with frosting on their noses, old couples holding scones like trophies, and now Lucy smiling behind a table full of cupcakes, Emmy beside her grinning from ear to ear. Madeline installed a small ramp near the side door for wheelchairs, no permits, no press releases, just a hammer 2 hours, and Clayton's help. She also hung a sign above the back counter, handwritten, simple. Everyone deserves a second slice. As Madeline and Clayton spent more time together at the bakery, something unspoken began to settle between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was something deeper. Respect. Ease. The kind of connection that doesn't need to announce itself to be known. Clayton would fix the leaky faucet. Madeline would bring him coffee before he even asked. He'd restock the sugar bins. She'd remember how he took his toast burnt just enough to matter. And when she laughed now, really laughed, it came from somewhere real, from somewhere that hadn't echoed in years. Still, not everyone in Ashbury was sold on the new arrangement. In the produce aisle of Daisy's Market, 2 older women stood whispering over heads of lettuce. "You heard she's staying. Which one, the cake woman?" "Yes, and she's got him working at the bakery now." "Him? Who? Clayton Reed?" The other woman's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be. He's sweet, but that man's had a cloud over his head since his wife passed." And now he's sharing scones with a millionaire divorcee. God works in mysterious ways. He sure does. Back at the bakery, Clayton was learning to fold dough. Poorly. Madeline laughed as she watched him fumble. "You're not kneading it. You're strangling it." "I fix cars," he grunted. "They don't talk back. Neither does bread. It just quietly judges you." He smirked. "Kinda like you." She tossed a pinch of flour at him. It landed square on his chest. For a moment they stood in playful silence, eyes locked, tension lingering like static in the air. Then Clayton stepped back. "Careful, Grant. You keep looking at me like that, I might think you're human." Madeline smiled. "Wouldn't want to ruin my brand." By mid-afternoon, the bakery buzzed with quiet joy. Lucy was there rolling up her sleeves to pipe frosting onto cookies. Emmy narrated like a TV host. And here our guest chef creates a swirl that rivals the Milky Way across the room. Mr. Baker, the bakery's retired former owner, wandered in. His cane tapped the floor in rhythm with the old bell above the door. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "This place hasn't smelled this good since 1999. Madeline turned. "Mr. Baker," he tipped his hat. "Back when I owned this joint, I always said a bakery without heart is just a sugar shop. Looks like you brought the heart back." Madeline blinked, surprised. "Thank you. That means more than you know." He pointed at the girls. "You let 'em keep doing that. Let 'em make a mess. That's where the magic is." And with that, he tapped his cane twice on the counter and left as quickly as he came. That night, as they closed up, Clayton lingered near the front window. Madeline stood beside him, watching the snow begin to fall again, soft, swirling like powdered sugar from the sky. He cleared his throat. "You ever think about going back?" She tilted her head. "To Chicago?" "Yeah, the suits, the boardrooms, the high life." She was quiet for a beat. "I used to think that was the only version of me that mattered," she said. But then Lucy smiled, and Emmy laughed. "And you helped me build a ramp without asking a single question." She looked at him. "I think I like this version of me better." Clayton nodded. "So do I." Outside, the sign flickered in the window. "The Last Slice Foundation. Coming soon." And inside that little bakery in a town forgotten by most, 2 broken people stood beside each other, no longer broken, just becoming. The first snowflake fell just past dusk. By the time the church bells chimed 7, the entire town of Ashbury was swallowed in white. It came in fast, thick, and relentless, like the sky had finally let go of everything it had been holding back. Flakes clung to windows piled against doorways and painted the streets with quiet urgency. Inside the bakery, Madeline Grant wiped her hands on a towel, glancing out the fogged-up glass. "That came out of nowhere," she murmured. Clayton crouched beneath the sink, fixing a leak for the third time. That week muttered Midwest winter. Always shows up late like a drunk uncle with a point to prove. Madeline smiled, but her eyes didn't leave the window. A strange worry tugged at her chest. Something unspoken. The bakery was nearly empty, just the tray of sugar cookies cooling near the register and the soft hum of the old heater kicking in and out like it couldn't make up its mind. She checked her watch. Shouldn't Lucy and Emmy be here by now? Clayton looked up, his hands still gripping a wrench. They were walking from our place. 10-minute tops. Maybe the snow slowed them down. He stood, wiped his hands, but even he didn't believe his own reassurance. Outside, the wind howled. 3 blocks away, Nana June's house flickered in and out of power. The lights buzzed, then dimmed again. The old furnace gave a desperate cough. Lucy sat bundled in layers, her thin frame shivering despite the blankets. "I don't like this," she whispered. Her voice cracked with fatigue. "I know, sweetheart," said Nana June, pacing near the thermostat. "The heat's going. I lit some candles. Emmy's in the kitchen grabbing more blankets." As if on cue, Emmy rushed in, arms full of fabric. Her cheeks were pink from cold and nerves. "Dad said the bakery has a gas oven, right?" she asked. "Even if the power's out, the heat stays on." Nana nodded slowly. "It should." "Then we need to go," Emmy said firmly. "Now." Nana hesitated. "Sweetheart, the snow Lucy's freezing," Emmy interrupted. "We can't stay here." Lucy looked up. "I can do it, if you help." Emmy turned to her wide-eyed. "Are you sure?" Lucy managed a nod. "It's only 3 blocks." And so, like 2 tiny warriors in oversized coats, they layered up. Emmy wrapped Lucy in scarves and mittens, and Nana pushed the wheelchair to the front door. "I'll be right behind you in the truck," Nana said. "But if I lose traction, don't wait. Get to the bakery and go inside." Emmy nodded. Then, into the storm they went. At the bakery, the front bell jingled soft, frantic. Madeline turned. And there they were. Emmy, breathless and red-cheeked, pushing Lucy through the door, snow clinging to their boots and coats, their faces full of relief and desperation. Clayton was across the room in seconds. "Lucy," he knelt beside her, brushing snow off her lap. "You're freezing. Why didn't you call?" "No power," Emmy said, teeth chattering. "And the house was too cold. We knew the bakery would be warm." Madeline sprang into action. "Bring her to the back. The oven's still hot?" Within minutes, Lucy was wrapped in a quilt in front of the industrial gas oven, her hands cradling a mug of warm milk. Madeline crouched beside her, gently pressing her fingers to Lucy's cheeks. "Color's coming back," she said. "You got here just in time." Clayton pulled Emmy into a hug. His voice cracked. "You did the right thing, baby." "I just followed Lucy," she whispered. She was the brave one. The bakery glowed from the inside now like a sanctuary in the storm. The gas oven roared softly and candles flickered along the windowsills. Outside, the wind howled, but inside there was warmth cocoa and the smell of sugar cookies that no one had the heart to eat. They made a bed of blankets for the girls in the back just beneath the bakery's family favorites menu board. Emmy was already asleep, one arm draped across Lucy's shoulder. Clayton watched them from across the room, rubbing his tired face with one hand. Madeline sat beside him on a flour sack. "Thanks for not yelling at me," he said softly. "I'm not your mother," she replied, "though I might yell at you for letting your daughter trek through a snowstorm next time." He huffed a quiet laugh. Then silence. For a while, they just sat there listening to the storm argue with the windows. And then Madeline spoke, soft, deliberate. "Sophie was born in winter. January. A blizzard the day I went into labor." Clayton looked over. She had never said her daughter's name before. "Everything went wrong that night," Madeline continued. "We couldn't get to the hospital in time. The ambulance got stuck. By the time they got us out, I thought I'd lose her before she even had a chance. But she made it. Madeline smiled. She did. 3 years of loud, messy, beautiful life. Then she went quiet. When she finally looked at him again, her eyes were wet. I used to bake with her every Saturday. Just the two of us. We made this mess flour in our hair, sugar in our shoes, and we didn't care. She'd always say, "Make it messy, Mama. That's how you know it's fun." Clayton didn't respond. He didn't need to. After a moment, she whispered, "I forgot what that kind of joy felt like. Until I met your girls." He placed a hand gently over hers. "I think they brought you back," he said. She looked at their hands at the warmth there. Maybe they did. At midnight, the power flickered back on with a groan and a blink, startling the bakery into life. Madeline stood slowly stretched and flipped the switch to dim the front lights. Then she walked back toward the girls to check on them one last time. But what she saw made her stop. Lucy was awake, eyes open, calm, and smiling. Her voice was soft but steady. "I like it here," she said. "It smells like mornings I used to dream about." Madeline knelt beside her. "You're safe now." "I know," Lucy said. Then she reached out and took Madeline's hand. "I think Sophie would have liked me." Madeline froze. Then her throat closed. And then, for the first time in 7 years, Madeline Grant cried. Not quietly, not neatly. It was the kind of cry that leaves you hollowed out and lightened all at once. Clayton watched from across the room, his eyes misted too. He didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He just let her break open. And in that little bakery, wrapped in the arms of sugar and snow, something sacred happened. A woman shattered, and then began to heal. The storm passed in the night. By morning, the streets of Ashbury glistened under a heavy coat of snow, sparkling under the soft light of a winter sun that had finally found its way through the clouds. The town stirred slowly like someone waking from a long and unexpected dream. Inside Harper's bakery, the scent of cinnamon and hope lingered in the air. Clayton sat near the front window sipping coffee from a chipped mug, watching Emmy and Lucy color at a table near the counter. Lucy's legs, still wrapped in a warm blanket, rested on a makeshift footrest. Her cheeks held a rosy glow that hadn't been there just days before. Behind the counter, Madeline wiped down trays with slow, thoughtful hands. She didn't speak much that morning. She didn't need to. The night had done something irreversible, broken a dam inside her. And now, with the tears gone, there was space. Space to breathe. Space to build. Outside, the world felt quiet. Inside, it felt like the beginning of something. At 9:12 a.m., the bell over the bakery door rang. Martha walked in carrying 2 grocery bags and a breathless voice. "You all seen this?" she said, holding up her phone like it was on fire. Madeline raised an eyebrow. Seeing what Martha turned the screen toward her. A video. Fuzzy footage, but unmistakable, Lucy and Emmy pushing through the snowstorm into the bakery. The camera must have caught it from a nearby shop's security cam, and somehow it had gone viral overnight. The caption read, "Wheelchair girl walks through blizzard to save her friend, and warms a CEO's frozen heart." It had over 1.7 million views. By noon, 3 more reporters had called. By 3 p.m., Gateau Grant's main office in Chicago was in full meltdown. And by dinner, Madeline's private inbox had over 200 new messages, some from strangers, some from news outlets, and a handful from the Gateau board of directors. The final one, labeled urgent, simply read, "You need to come back." Now, the board is calling an emergency meeting. Madeline sat at the back of the bakery, phone in hand, Clayton across from her watching her face. "They're scared," she said quietly. "The board. They think I've gone rogue, that I've tarnished the brand." He leaned back, arms crossed. "By helping a kid not freeze to death," she offered a tight smile. "By helping a kid without permission." Clayton shook his head. "What do they want from you?" "Control," she said. "Always control." She looked at him. "When I built Gateau, I thought success would protect me. That if I got high enough, powerful enough, no one could tell me what I was allowed to feel. But I was wrong. The higher you go, the more people think they own your heart. He didn't say anything, because what could he say? He knew what it was like to be owned by expectations. He'd lived it in grief, in poverty, in silence. I have to go back, she said. His jaw tightened. For how long, I don't know. And what about here? Madeline swallowed. I'll come back. You sure? He asked, not with bitterness, but with fear that maybe this had been too good to last. I'm not done here, Clay. I'm not done with this town. Or with you. Or with those girls. He studied her, his eyes searching for doubt. But all he saw was a woman who had finally found the pieces of herself she'd lost, and didn't want to lose them again. Then go, he said, but come back whole. The next morning, Madeline stepped onto the train bound for Chicago. The sun was bright, the snow already melting into the streets, and Ashbury grew smaller in the window as the train pulled away. She clutched a thermos of bakery coffee and a folded napkin with a note scribbled in Emmy's handwriting, "Come back soon. The cookies need you." It made her laugh, then tear up, then smile again. Back in Chicago, the Gateau Grant boardroom was just as she remembered, sterile sharp and smelling faintly of leather and polished ambition. 12 seats, 12 expressions of varying disapproval. The board chair. Derek Langston adjusted his tie and leaned forward. "Madeline, we've been trying to reach you." "I know. Then perhaps you understand why we're here." Madeline didn't flinch. "You think I've embarrassed the company?" "You've endangered it," Derek said. "This story has gone global. There are rumors. People are asking if Gateau is now a charity." She smiled. "Maybe it should be." Silence. Derek blinked. "Excuse me." I said, "Maybe it's time we remember that cake isn't just a luxury. It's comfort. It's memory. It's healing. And we've forgotten that." Another board member chimed in. "You're the face of this company, Madeline. This is about control of the narrative." "I'm not interested in the narrative," she said. "I'm interested in the truth." And what truth is that Madeline stood, pulled a folded paper from her bag, and laid it on the table. "My resignation," she said calmly. Gasps rippled across the room. "I built this company from a $10 mixer and a hand-me-down recipe book, and I'm proud of it. But I refuse to run it if it no longer serves people. Real people. Like Lucy. Like Emmy. Like me." Derek stared at her, stunned. "You'll walk away from everything." "No," she said. "I'm walking toward something better." Then she turned heels, echoing down the marble hallway out of the building and into the streets. It wasn't freedom that hit her first. It was relief. That night, Madeline posted her own message online. "I'm not a CEO anymore. I'm a baker, and bakers feed people. That's what we do." Coming soon, the Last Slice Foundation. For every child who's ever needed to feel seen. For every parent who's ever lost. For every person who's ever thought they weren't enough, because everyone deserves a second slice. The post exploded within hours. Thousands of shares, thousands of comments, but only one message made her cry. It was from Lucy, a photo of a cookie. Frosted, badly uneven swirls glittered with crushed candy. The caption read, "I made this for you. It's messy, but so was I. Thank you for not giving up on us." Madeline wiped her eyes, then smiled. She booked a one-way ticket home. It was Lucy's 12th birthday. The kind of day that once would have passed like any other, quiet, tucked away in the corner of a house that barely remembered how to celebrate anything. But not this year. This year, there were plans. Emmy had made sure of that. She'd organized everything like a miniature party planner with crayons and vision balloons from the hardware store streamers taped with love and cupcakes so unevenly frosted they looked like they'd been decorated in a moving car. But they were perfect because they were theirs. The entire back room of Harper's Bakery had been transformed with warmth and whimsy. Lucy's wheelchair had a handmade birthday crown taped to the back. Her favorite color light purple was everywhere, napkins, plates, even the frosting. And as the candles were lit and the lights dimmed, it was the first time since the accident that Lucy wasn't defined by what she couldn't do. She wasn't the girl in the chair, she was just the girl with the birthday. But Madeline Grant wasn't there, not yet. At that exact moment, she was sitting in a black town car idling outside the Gateau Grant headquarters in Chicago. The resignation letter, already delivered the storm, already weathered. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Back to the station, Ms. Grant." She hesitated. "Yes," she said, "and step on it." She glanced down at her watch. 3:41 p.m. If the train left on time, she'd make it to Ashbury by 7:00. The party would be halfway over by then, but she'd be there before the cake was gone. Hopefully. But even as the city rolled past in a blur of stoplights and cold glass buildings, Madeline couldn't shake the feeling she was already too late for more than just a birthday. Because something had shifted. Not just in her, but in them. In Clayton, in Emmy, in Lucy, in the town. And she wasn't sure where she stood anymore. Back at the bakery, Clayton stood at the center of the room holding a small note card in one hand and a glass of lemonade in the other. He cleared his throat. All right, settle down. I've got something to say." The kids quieted. The adults leaned in, and Lucy turned her chair slightly to face him. He looked down at the card but didn't read from it. Instead, he looked at Lucy. "Truth is, I don't do speeches." "Never liked the sound of my own voice," he started, and a few parents chuckled. "But there's a girl here today who reminds me every single day that some voices don't have to shout to be heard." He stepped closer to her. "Lucy, you've been through more in 12 years than most people go through in a lifetime. And yet, here you are, smiling, teaching us all how to laugh again. I think that deserves more than just a birthday song." Emmy clapped first, then everyone followed. A roaring applause that echoed through the bakery walls and out into the street. Lucy blushed deep pink and tried to duck behind her cupcake. Clayton waited for the noise to settle, then lifted his glass. "To Lucy, for reminding us what brave looks like." Everyone raised their cups. To Lucy. Outside, snow began to fall again, light this time, soft flakes swirling like confetti. Inside, Lucy leaned toward Emmy and whispered, "I thought she'd be here." "Me too," Emmy said. Then with a small sigh, Lucy looked at her cake. "Can I still make a wish?" "You better." Emmy smiled. "That's the rule." Lucy nodded, closed her eyes, and leaned forward. She blew out all 12 candles in a single breath. Across town, the train screeched to a halt. Madeline rushed off with her coat clutched tight and a gift bag swinging from her wrist. A small package inside, carefully wrapped in bakery paper tied with a lavender ribbon. She ran, through slush, through wind. Her heels weren't practical, but she didn't care. Her lungs burned. Her heart thundered. She wasn't just running to the party. She was running toward a second chance. Back in the bakery, people were packing up. Parents gathered coats. Kids grabbed leftover cookies. The room buzzed with after-party joy. Clayton began stacking plates, wiping tables, but his eyes kept drifting to the door. Still no sign of her. Lucy sat quietly now, a little tired but glowing. She whispered something to Emmy, who nodded and ran toward Clayton. "Dad," she said, tugging his sleeve. "Lucy wants to open your letter now." "My what?" "The one you've been carrying in your jacket for days." Clayton flushed. "You snooped, I observed," Emmy said proudly. He sighed, smiled, and reached into his coat. From the inside pocket he pulled out a slightly creased envelope. On the front, in his messy handwriting, "To Lucy, on your birthday." He walked over and handed it to her. Lucy opened it slowly, then unfolded the letter inside. Clayton cleared his throat. "You want me to read it?" She nodded, so he knelt beside her chair and began. "Dear Lucy, you probably don't know this, but I used to think love had to be big. Expensive gifts, grand gestures, perfect words. But then I met you, and I watched how a single smile from you changed the way my daughter sleeps at night, how a tiny cake made you feel seen. And I realized, love is small. Love is showing up. Love is weathering storms. Love is letting someone into your life even when it hurts. You are Love Lucy, and you've reminded me how to believe in it again." Clayton paused, eyes glassy. Lucy wiped hers without a word, and then from the front of the bakery the bell rang. Everyone turned, and there she was, wind-blown, pink-cheeked, out of breath. Madeline. Clayton stood. Lucy gasped. Emmy clapped like it was part of the performance. "I'm sorry I'm late," Madeline said, voice cracking. "Trains don't care about cupcakes." Lucy smiled so wide it looked like light. Madeline stepped forward and knelt beside her. "I missed the candles, but I brought something just as sweet." She handed Lucy the gift bag. Inside, a single cupcake, hand-frosted, topped with a tiny sugar flower. Lucy lifted it gently. "Did you make this?" Madeline nodded. "It's messy, but so was I." Lucy laughed. "Then it's perfect." Later that night, after everyone left, Madeline and Clayton stood side by side, closing up shop. "She saved me," Madeline whispered, nodding toward the cupcake wrapper on the counter. Clayton looked at her. "Maybe we saved each other." She reached into her coat, pulled out her phone, and showed him the foundation's official logo, the Last Slice Foundation. Clayton read it quietly, underneath a tagline, "Because healing starts with a taste of hope." Madeline smiled. "We launch next week, and Ashbury's going to be our home base." Clayton looked at her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he took her hand. And, for the first time in a long time, neither of them wanted to let go. The day after Lucy's birthday, Ashbury woke to an unusual quiet, the kind that hangs in the air before something important happens. And in the heart of the town, the lights of Harper's Bakery flicked on at 6:00 a.m., sharp. The ovens warmed. The scent of vanilla clove and memory rose like a hymn, but something was different. There were no trays being loaded, no hustle behind the counter. Instead, a card was taped to the glass door. "Closed today for something more important." The Last Slice team. Inside, Madeline Grant stood in the center of the room surrounded by stacks of press kits, folders, and printed posters. Her eyes moved across every corner like she was seeing it for the first time. Not just a bakery anymore, but a birthplace. Clayton walked in holding 2 coffees. "You okay?" he asked, handing her one. "I don't think I've ever been more terrified in my life," she admitted. He smirked. "You once told off a Wall Street banker with a croissant in your hand." She raised an eyebrow. That was confidence. This is hope. Clayton glanced at the time. "The press conference starts in 20. "You still think I'm crazy?" she asked. He stepped closer. "Madeline, this is the sanest thing you've ever done." Outside, people began to gather. Reporters, photographers, locals, and a few curious strangers who had followed the viral story from cities far away. Lucy, bundled in her purple scarf, sat front and center, holding a warm cookie in her gloved hands. Emmy stood beside her, proudly wearing a badge that said Junior Ambassador. Even Martha had shown up with a box of muffins just in case someone forgot what this place is really about. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Madeline stepped onto the small platform outside the bakery. The microphone wobbled slightly. The winter wind kissed her cheeks. Cameras clicked. Phones pointed. Silence fell. She looked out at the crowd, not at the press, but at the people who mattered. The ones who had taught her that healing was louder than headlines. Then she spoke. "When I was 3 years old, my grandmother taught me how to bake bread. Not because she wanted me to become a chef, but because she believed bread brings people together. She used to say, 'You can't hate someone after sharing warm bread with them.' I built a company that forgot that. I chased perfection, image, empire, and somewhere along the way I lost the reason I ever picked up a mixing bowl, until I came to Ashbury, until I met Lucy, Emmy, Clayton, and I remembered. So today, I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here as a baker, a mother, a woman who broke and learned how to be whole again. And I'm proud to announce—" She paused. The crowd leaned in. "The launch of the Last Slice Foundation." Cheers broke out. A few camera shutters snapped faster. Madeline continued. "The Last Slice is dedicated to children who've suffered loss, trauma, or silence. It's for kids like Lucy who remind us every day that bravery doesn't always walk on 2 feet. For families like Clayton and Emmy who teach us that love shows up even when it's tired, broke, and scared. And for anyone who's ever needed a reason to believe again, and found it in a single slice of cake. Applause rose again this time, longer, warmer. Madeline stepped down. Clayton was there, waiting, eyes glinting with something between pride and awe. She didn't say anything. He didn't need her to. Later that afternoon, the bakery reopened its doors not for business but for community. Kids decorated cupcakes at a long table. Parents exchanged stories over scones. A violinist played softly near the window, and someone put on a pot of spiced cider. The grand opening banner for the Last Slice Foundation hung above the counter, framed by 2 strings of fairy lights that Emmy insisted gave it extra sparkle points. In the back corner, Lucy sat with a blank notebook and a pencil in hand. Madeline noticed and walked over. "What are you working on?" Lucy smiled. "My story." Oh, Lucy nodded. "I want to write about what it felt like. Before the cake. And after." Madeline crouched beside her. "That's a story the world needs." Lucy looked up. "You think they'll listen?" Madeline didn't hesitate. "I think they're already listening." Meanwhile, in a sleek conference room back in Chicago, Derek Langston Gatto, Grant's interim CEO, sat with a copy of the New York Times open in front of him. On the front page, "From Frost to Fire. How One Slice Started a National Movement." A photo of Madeline and Lucy smiling in front of the bakery. Derek sighed, closed the paper, and muttered, "She always did know how to make a mess." And a miracle. Back in Ashbury, night fell gently over the town. The bakery emptied slowly, laughter echoing faintly as people walked home under a sky painted with stars. Inside, only 4 people remained: Madeline, Clayton, Emmy, and Lucy. Madeline pulled a small box from beneath the counter. She opened it to reveal a cake, simple, elegant, and familiar. Vanilla sponge, buttercream frosting, sugar flowers in the corners. In the center, one phrase, "The last slice." Clayton read it out loud. "Is this—" "The very last one," Madeline said. "After this, I'm retiring the recipe." Lucy looked up. "Why?" "Because some things aren't meant to be sold," she said. "They're meant to be shared, once, and remembered always." She sliced the cake into 4 equal parts. 1 piece for Lucy, 1 for Emmy, 1 for Clayton. And the last. She placed it on a separate plate, then turned to the window. She opened it slightly and set the plate on the sill, letting the winter air wrap around it. "For Sophie," she whispered. Clayton stepped beside her, wrapping his arm gently around her shoulders. "She would have loved this," he said. "I think she does," Madeline said. They stood there for a moment, holding on to each other, watching the steam rise from the warm cake into the cold night air. Inside, Emmy leaned toward Lucy. "You think wishes ever come true?" she asked softly. Lucy smiled. "I think some already have." They looked out the window where Madeline and Clayton stood, their silhouettes soft in the glow of the bakery lights. Then Lucy looked down at her plate, at her slice, the last one. And she didn't feel broken anymore. She felt whole. Most bakeries open with the morning sun. But Harper's Bakery, now proudly home to the Last Slice Foundation, had become something more than a business. It was a heartbeat. A warm, steady rhythm in the center of Ashbury where the ovens didn't just bake bread, they baked belonging. 2 weeks had passed since the foundation's launch, and though the media frenzy had faded, what remained was something deeper, quieter, and more lasting. Every Saturday morning, the front window filled with fog from the heat of the kitchen and kids gathered behind the counter, flour streaked across their cheeks like war paint. And in the center of it all was Lucy. Her wheelchair adorned with rainbow ribbons, her hands steady as she showed a small boy how to pipe frosting onto a gingerbread heart. "You don't need it to be perfect," she told him, grinning. "You just need it to feel like you meant it." The boy looked up at her and nodded, then squirted a wild swirl of blue icing that looked more like an abstract painting than a flower. Lucy laughed. "That's art right there." Clayton watched from the doorway, arms crossed, a gentle smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The girl, who once barely spoke, now ran the Saturday workshop like a young chef in command of her own universe. Behind him, Emmy sat on a stool with her notebook writing something down in big, uneven letters. He leaned over her shoulder. Another story. It's not just a story, she said, tongue poking out in concentration. It's a chapter. Oh, yeah, Emmy said proudly. It's called Lucy's Recipes for Feeling Again. Clayton chuckled. Sounds like a bestseller. Emmy shrugged. Maybe I'll be a writer someday. He bent down and kissed the top of her head. You already are. In the kitchen, Madeline moved like someone who had finally come home to herself. She wore her flour-stained apron like armor. Her hair was pulled back, and for the first time in years her hands weren't trembling when she cracked eggs. She smiled to herself as she listened to the hum of voices and the clatter of kids learning how to make joy out of batter and buttercream. This was what she'd built. Not a company, a community. She turned as the back door creaked open. Standing there, looking slightly out of place and very much impressed, was Dr. Ellis, retired pediatric surgeon, and the man who had once operated on Lucy after the accident. Well, he said, stepping inside, it smells like memory in here. Madeline offered him a fresh roll. Good memories, I hope. He took it, broke it in half, and nodded. The best kind. Later that day, Dr. Ellis sat near the front window with Lucy watching her instruct a group of children like a seasoned teacher. She's come a long way, he said softly. She really has, Madeline replied, sitting beside him. He glanced at her. You all have. Madeline folded her hands in her lap. You were there, weren't you? At the hospital I was. Did you think she'd make it? He hesitated. Physically, yes. Emotionally, that's harder to predict. Trauma buries itself in the quiet places. You don't always know how deep it went until something brings the silence back to life. Madeline followed his gaze to Lucy, who was now laughing so hard she nearly dropped an entire bowl of sprinkles onto the floor. And what if the thing that brings it back, Madeline asked, is a cake? Dr. Ellis smiled. Then that's no ordinary cake. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the bakery shifted into a gentle hush. The kids packed up their confections, parents gathered coats and cookies, and one by one the tiny creators of chaos and color filtered out with frosting still on their noses. Madeline sat near the front with a cup of tea. Across from her, Clayton wiped down the tables, the scent of sugar and cinnamon still clinging to the air. He glanced up. You ever think about how wild this all is? She looked around the bakery at the faded brick walls and the chalkboard menu with kid-drawn doodles in the corners. Every day. He leaned on the counter, arms crossed. You left a multi-million-dollar empire to open a Saturday baking class in a town with one stoplight. She smirked. Yeah, and I've never felt richer. They both laughed, and for a moment it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Then Emmy burst in from the back holding a crumpled sheet of paper. Read this, she shouted, holding it out to Madeline. She smoothed it out and read aloud, the bakery that didn't close. Once there was a bakery that was supposed to shut down, but people kept walking in with broken hearts and leaving with full ones. So it stayed open. Not because it needed money, but because people needed each other. And every Saturday someone remembered how to smile again. The end. Madeline stared at the page, her throat tight. That's beautiful, she whispered. You wrote that? Emmy beamed. It's Lucy's idea. I just helped with the spelling. Clayton looked at Madeline. Think she just wrote your mission statement? Madeline folded the paper carefully. No, she wrote the truth. That evening, after the last crumb was swept and the last hug exchanged, Madeline turned off the front lights. The glow from the oven still warmed the air. She walked to the back where a corkboard had been set up full of photos, drawings, notes. She pinned Emmy's story right in the center. Then beside it, she placed a Polaroid someone had taken that morning, Lucy, mid-laugh, piping a heart onto a sugar cookie while a dozen other children watched her like she was magic. And maybe she was. Before she left for the night, Madeline stepped outside wrapped in her coat and looked up at the sky. It was clear, cold, quiet, no more storms, only stars. From behind her, Clayton's voice broke the silence. "You coming?" She turned. He stood there in the doorway, holding 2 mugs. "I made hot chocolate," he added. "Don't worry, it's edible this time." She laughed and walked toward him. "I wasn't worried," she said. "I have faith in your evolution." He handed her the mug and nudged the door open with his foot, and together they stepped back inside into the warmth, into the stillness, into something that looked a lot like forever. The church was small. No stained glass, no chandeliers, just weathered pews, wildflower bouquets tied with twine, and the kind of light that comes only through late spring windows, soft, golden, and full of promise. It was a Tuesday, not a traditional wedding day. But nothing about this love story had ever followed tradition. And maybe that was the point. At the front of the aisle stood Clayton Reed, his suit slightly too snug at the shoulders, his tie off by a centimeter. His hands fidgeted. His breath was uneven. But his eyes were steady. He wasn't nervous. He was in awe. Behind him sat a gathering of the town's heart. Mr. Baker, wearing the same suit he'd been married in 50 years ago, now 2 buttons shy of a full close. Martha dabbing at her eyes before the first chord even played. Dr. Ellis sitting near the front with a cane resting against the pew and a smile full of something holy. And at the very front, framed by soft lilac petals and a handmade aisle runner, Emmy had painted herself sat Lucy radiant in lavender with her curls brushed back and a small bouquet of frosting-colored daisies in her lap. Beside her stood Emmy, gripping a basket of flower petals like she'd been handed state secrets. "Ready," she whispered. Lucy nodded. "I've never been more." Then the soft chords of What a Wonderful World drifted from the piano and every head turned. Madeline Grant stood in the open doorway wrapped in simple cream fabric that hugged her like she finally knew who she was. No lace, no diamonds, just a dress with rolled sleeves and a pearl-pinned veil holding back her hair. She walked slowly, carefully every step, saying what words never could. That she had arrived, that she had survived, that she had chosen to love again, eyes open, scars, visible heart unlocked. Clayton's eyes didn't leave her. Not for a second. As she reached him, he took her hands strong and soft like something sacred, and in that moment the whole town breathed a little deeper. The officiant, a retired judge known for his lemon bars and fierce belief in second chances, stepped forward with a worn leather book in hand. "Today," he said, "we are not witnessing perfection. We're witnessing perseverance." The room stilled. "This isn't just about a bride and a groom," he continued. "This is about a community that dared to believe again. A man who stayed when he could have left. A woman who returned when she didn't have to. And 2 little girls who reminded us that healing is never quiet. It laughs, it bakes it, storms, it sings." He nodded gently to Lucy and Emmy. "So, today," the officiant said, smiling, "we celebrate not just love, but all the messy, magnificent ways we find our way back to it." Vows were exchanged, simple, tear-stained, and utterly honest. Clayton promised to keep showing up even on the days when he didn't have the words. Madeline promised to keep choosing softness even when the world asked her to be steel. When they kissed, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like a sigh at the end of a long day full of gratitude. After the ceremony, guests made their way down the street, following a string of handmade signs to Harper's Bakery, or what was now affectionately known as the bakery that didn't close. The shop had been transformed. String lights hung from every beam. Photos from the foundation's first workshops lined the walls. Polaroids of kids holding cupcakes, laughing with mouths full of frosting. In the center of the room stood a table. No grand cake. No fondant showpiece, just one small pedestal, and on it 1 slice, vanilla, buttercream, a single sugar flower. Madeline stood beside it holding a plate. She looked at the crowd, then turned to Lucy. "This," she said softly, "was always yours." Gasps, smiles, Some tears. Lucy took the plate, her hands trembling slightly. Then, with crutches supporting her frame, she stood. Unsteady at first, but then she found her balance. "I couldn't walk when I first got this cake," she said, voice clear. "And honestly, I didn't think I ever would." The room quieted. But someone who didn't even know me gave me a reason to believe again, to hope, to want something more than sadness. She looked at Madeline, then at the slice. "This cake gave me a reason to live," she said. "And today, it gives me a reason to believe in forever." Applause erupted, loud and unfiltered, a standing ovation for a girl who had taught them all how to stand tall again. Even Mr. Baker, hands-shaking, wiped his eyes with a napkin that smelled faintly of cinnamon. The rest of the night felt like magic. Kids twirled beneath the fairy lights, their laughter echoing through the street. Lucy read a poem Emmy had written titled, "How to Bake a New Beginning." Martha passed around lemon squares, whispering to guests which ones had the good crust. Madeline and Clayton danced slowly in the back corner, the oven light flickering above them like a memory. At some point, no one could quite remember when a soft hush fell over the bakery. Everyone gathered near the pedestal. The last slice, still untouched. Not because they forgot, but because they remembered that some things aren't meant to be eaten. They're meant to be honored, to remind us that sweetness still exists, that second chances are real, that love in its quietest form is still the bravest thing we do. Outside, snow had long melted. Spring had taken hold. But inside the bakery, the warmth wasn't from ovens or lights. It was from hearts, beating, healing, becoming, together. Sometimes the sweetest things in life don't come in grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes they come in the form of a single slice, a warm gesture, a small act of kindness, a reason to believe just when someone needs it most. If the last slice touched something in your heart today, maybe it reminded you of a moment when you were seen, or perhaps of someone who gave you hope even when you couldn't find it for yourself. We want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a moment like this? A story of unexpected love healing or kindness that stayed with you? Maybe it was a neighbor, a stranger, a friend. Maybe you were the one who gave someone their last slice. Share your story in the comments below. Let's fill this space with hope, one slice at a time. And while you're at it, let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to like, share, or send it to someone who might need it today. You never know who's waiting for a sign. This might be it. And if you'd like more heartfelt stories just like this, tales that make you laugh, cry, and maybe believe a little more in the good that still exists, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that matters. From our hearts to yours, thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, be kind, stay soft, and keep believing in second chances. Because sometimes one slice is all it takes.